Your blurry vision may not be just aging. It may be a slow chemical burn happening inside the lens of your eye every time blood sugar surges, inflammation rises, and unstable fats feed the fire. You're watching boring physician. Picture a raw egg white, clear, fluid. Light passes through it easily, then heat hits, the proteins twist, the structure changes, and transparency is gone. You cannot reverse that by wishing, cooling, or waiting. That is the image we need in our minds, because something similar can happen inside the eye. If the world has started to look hazy in the morning, if headlights bloom at night, if faces seem a little less sharp than they used to, this matters more than most people realize. We are not talking about vanity. We are talking about the biology of sight. Here is what we know. A healthy lens stays clear because its proteins remain organized in a precise structure that lets light pass through. What this suggests is deeply uncomfortable. When that structure is damaged by glycation, oxidation, and chronic inflammatory stress, the lens can slowly lose that clarity, and that means the fog is not always random bad luck. Sometimes it is chemistry, sometimes it is breakfast, sometimes it is the pattern repeated so often that we stop seeing it until our eyes start paying the price. Now watch this. The lens is a remarkable piece of tissue. It is mostly water and highly specialized proteins arranged with microscopic precision. It does not have the luxury of a direct blood supply like many other tissues do. It depends on the surrounding fluid environment. That makes it elegant. It also makes it vulnerable, because whatever repeatedly floods that environment can start altering the proteins that keep the lens transparent. And one of the biggest drivers is glycation. Glycation sounds technical, but the picture is simple. Sugar sticks. It binds where it should not bind. Proteins that were flexible and organized become stiff, misshapen, and clumped. Why does that matter? Because clumped lens proteins scatter light instead of transmitting it cleanly. Applied here, that means repeated glucose spikes are not just energy events. They can become structural stress for the eye, not overnight, not dramatically in a single meal, but meal after meal, month after month, year after year. That is why this conversation is not really about good foods and bad foods. It is about whether we are feeding repair or feeding damage. It is about whether the internal environment favors clarity or clouding. There are 3 common dietary exposures that can keep pushing the eye toward that cloudy state. They look ordinary. They are culturally normal. Some people think they are harmless, but in the right metabolic setting, they act like fuel on an already smoldering fire. The first is the obvious one, and most people still underestimate it: added sugar. You may be thinking, I do not even eat desserts that often. I barely touch sweets. That is exactly why this catches people. The issue is rarely only the spoon of sugar you can see. It is the sugar hiding in sauces, sweetened yogurt, dressings, breads, flavored drinks, and foods marketed as light or healthy. Mechanism: added sugar can raise circulating glucose quickly. Why it matters: rapid glucose exposure increases the chance of glycation and oxidative stress in delicate tissues. Practical use: start reading labels for added sugar in foods you do not emotionally classify as sweet. Then remove the daily ones first, because repetition matters more than drama. One reason this is so deceptive is that sugar does not just affect chemistry. It can affect fluid balance too. When glucose rises, the lens environment can shift. That may contribute to temporary changes in focus and visual sharpness in some people. Have you ever had a day when your vision felt off for no obvious reason? That clue should make us pause. We keep hearing that symptoms arrive out of nowhere, but often the body whispers before it screams. And sugar does more than stick to proteins. It helps drive oxidative stress. Think of oxidative stress as biochemical rust. Molecules become unstable. Structures take damage. Recovery systems get strained. In the eye, where transparency depends on order, that matters a lot. So what do? We stop treating added sugar like a harmless background character. We treat it like a metabolic signal. The practical move is not perfection. It is elimination of the obvious daily inputs first. sweet drinks, sweetened coffee add-ins, dessert yogurts, sweet sauces, and packaged snacks. If you remove those consistently, many people notice their palate changes faster than expected. The constant craving loses volume. The baseline starts shifting. And that matters because the next culprit is even more deceptive. It looks like real food. It may even sit at the center of the plate. It feels traditional, comforting, ordinary, innocent. But metabolically, it can behave with shocking speed once digestion starts. Refined starch, white bread, refined pasta, crackers, soft bakery products, many wraps, many packaged cereals, foods that begin as processed flour and end as a rapid glucose delivery system. Mechanism: refined starch is quickly broken down into glucose, beginning in the mouth and continuing through digestion. Why it matters? That can create repeated blood sugar surges even in people who say they don't eat sugar. Practical use: swap the refined version for intact, fiber-rich carbohydrate sources and notice how your energy, hunger, and cravings change. This is the contradiction that catches people off guard. Very often, too, they proudly avoid sweets, but they eat refined flour all day. Then they wonder why energy crashes hit, waistlines expand, fasting insulin creeps upward, and vision keeps getting less reliable. Because insulin is not just about diabetes labels. Insulin is traffic control. It helps move glucose where it needs to go. But if we keep sending wave after wave of easy glucose into the system, the traffic system starts getting less efficient. Cells stop responding as well. More insulin is needed. More metabolic stress builds. Here's what we know. You can have not terrible standard numbers and still have a system under pressure. What this suggests is that waiting for a dramatic diagnosis can miss the quieter phase where damage is already being encouraged. And the eye is not isolated from that. The retina and lens depend on a stable supply environment. They need oxygen, nutrient delivery, and controlled inflammation. Refined starch works against that when it dominates the diet, especially when fiber is stripped away. Without fiber, you lose the braking system. Glucose arrives faster. Insulin demand rises harder. Inflammatory signals often climb with it. Highly refined carbohydrate patterns can also travel with elevated triglycerides, more visceral fat accumulation, and a more inflamed internal state overall. That changes the terrain, and once the terrain changes, tissues that rely on fine balance start losing resilience. If you want a practical move, make it brutally simple. Replace refined flour staples with foods that still look like they came from the earth. Lentils, beans, intact grains when tolerated, sweet potatoes, higher fiber roots, and legumes. The mechanism is slower absorption. Why it matters is steadier glucose and less chaos. The application is one swap at the meal you repeat most often. Maybe that is breakfast. Maybe it is lunch. But do not underestimate the power of the meal you eat almost automatically. Now here comes the one most people never see coming. You can remove the sugar. You can cut the refined flour. You can still keep feeding inflammation if the fats in your kitchen are unstable, overheated, and built into your routine through packaged foods. We need to talk about industrial seed oils. Not because fear is useful, because chemistry is. These oils are heavily processed, widely used in ultra-processed foods, and often dominate restaurant and packaged food fat exposure. Mechanism: under processing and repeated heating, some oils become more prone to oxidation. Why it matters: oxidized fats can add to inflammatory burden and cellular stress. Practical use: reduce packaged foods built on these oils and choose simpler fat sources for cooking that fit the method and temperature. This is where cell membranes matter. Every cell in the body depends on the quality of its outer membrane. That membrane is not decorative. It helps regulate signaling, transport, resilience, and repair. When the metabolic environment is chronically inflammatory, membranes suffer. When membranes suffer, tissues become less adaptable. And the eye is exquisitely sensitive to that loss of adaptability. This is educational, not medical advice. We're evidence-led and we manage risk. The problem is not that one single meal destroys vision. The problem is that the body remembers patterns, repeated glucose spikes, repeated inflammatory hits, repeated oxidized fat exposure, repeated undernourishment of the systems that normally defend the eye. That pattern becomes the clinical trajectory. So when we talk about protecting vision, we are really talking about changing the terrain. Less glycation, less oxidative stress, less inflammatory burden, better insulin sensitivity, more stable cellular energy, better recovery capacity. Those are not abstract concepts. They are the background conditions that influence what happens to tissues over time. And now the question becomes obvious. If we stop feeding the fire, can we support repair? This is where people usually swing to one of two extremes. Either they expect a miracle in 48 hours, or they assume nothing can change at all. Both positions miss how biology usually works. The body repairs slowly, selectively, and under conditions. It needs the damaging inputs lowered. It needs the right building materials available. And it needs time. That brings us to the compounds people always ask about. Certain nutrients found in whole foods are especially relevant to the eye because they help support antioxidant defense and light filtering in retinal tissues. The names matter less than the pattern. Dark leafy greens, deeply colored produce, egg yolks in the right context, foods rich in protective pigments and supportive fats. Mechanism. These compounds help support antioxidant defense and tissue resilience. Why it matters? The eye is constantly exposed to light and metabolic stress, so protective capacity matters. Practical use. Build them into meals you will actually repeat instead of chasing expensive pills you forget to take. Do you see the deeper theme yet? We are not hacking the eye. We are changing the ecosystem the eye has to live in. That means the microbiome matters too. When diet quality drops, gut bacteria can shift in ways that amplify immune stress and inflammation. Mechanism. The gut ecosystem talks to the immune system constantly. Why it matters? When that conversation becomes more inflammatory, distant tissues can feel it. Practical use. Increase fiber diversity, reduce ultra-processed foods, and let your gut microbes help lower the total inflammatory load. And yes, the brain enters this conversation as well. The same broad pattern that hurts metabolic flexibility can also undermine long-term brain health. That does not mean every blurry eye predicts cognitive decline. It means the pathways overlap enough that we should stop pretending these systems live in separate worlds. So ask yourself something uncomfortable. Are you feeding the tissues you want to keep for the next 20 years, or just sedating cravings for the next 20 minutes? That question changes behavior when we answer it honestly. If this kind of evidence-led breakdown helps you cut through noise, subscribe to Boring Physician. Here is what is clear. Vision loss rarely feels dramatic at the beginning. It feels subtle, slightly duller contrast. More glare, more hesitation at night, more dependence on brighter light. The danger is not only the damage, the danger is how normal it starts to feel. Which of these is hardest for you to remove? Sugar, refined flour, or hidden oils? And which one have you been defending because it feels normal, even while your body may be telling you otherwise? Because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. The lens does not care about marketing. Your retina does not care about packaging. Your metabolism does not care that something is common, nostalgic, or convenient. Biology only responds to inputs. So yes, this is hopeful, but it is also a warning. We can lower the fire. We can change the terrain. We can give repair a better chance, but only if we stop calling daily damage treats, stop calling metabolic chaos moderation, and stop waiting for blur to become blindness before we act. And there is one more nutrient pattern that could change how we think about protecting the aging eye altogether. Most people never look there until it is far too late.